No one could calm the Alpha King's rage until rejected Omega touched him. Now he can't let her go. The kingdom of Varinth had not seen a peaceful sunrise in many years. Clouds always gathered above the black towers of the royal palace. Thunder rolled without warning. The wind carried a restless sound, like wolves crying in the distance. People said the sky reflected its king. King Elric Thornvale. He was known as the Alpha King, ruler of all northern lands. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes like burning silver, he stood like a warrior carved from stone. But there was something else in him, something heavy, something dangerous. They said his anger could shake the earth. And it was not only a rumor. When he was displeased, fires sparked in the hearth without flame. Windows cracked, soldiers trembled. Even seasoned generals lowered their eyes. No one dared speak against him. No one dared touch him. Years ago, an old prophecy had spread through the kingdom. The king born under a blood moon will carry a storm inside his soul. Until the storm is quieted, the land will never rest. Many believed the prophecy spoke of Aelric. He had been born during a red moon, when wolves howled and lightning struck the royal tower. Since childhood, strange things followed him. If he cried, glass shattered. If he grew angry, winds rose outside the palace walls. As he grew into a man, so did his power, and so did his rage. Some believed he was cursed. Others believed he was chosen by ancient forces to protect the kingdom. Either way, he ruled with strength that no one could challenge. But strength was not peace. The people obeyed him. They did not love him. Far from the royal court, near the edge of the capital city, lived a young Omega named Elowen. She had soft brown hair, quiet gray eyes, and a presence so gentle that people often forgot she was there. She had grown up in a small pack village in the southern hills, but she had never truly belonged there. She was different, too calm, too silent when others shouted. When her pack chose leaders and protectors, they looked at stronger voices, louder hearts. Elowen was overlooked again and again. Whispers followed her. She is too weak. She does not carry proper Omega spirit. She will not bring honor. One day, after a harsh winter and rising tensions, the pack rejected her completely. They said she brought imbalance. They said she did not fit. So she left. With no family name, no protection, and no place to return to. She traveled north to Varinth, hoping to find work in the capital city. Life there was not kind, but it was fair in one way. The city did not ask about her past. It only asked if she could work. Elowen found work in the palace kitchens. She cleaned floors, she carried water, she kept her head low and her voice soft. The palace was grand and beautiful, but heavy with tension. Servants moved quickly and quietly. Guards stood like statues. Everyone feared sudden storms. Everyone feared the king. Elowen heard stories about him every day.
He dismissed 3 advisors this week. The council chamber cracked from lightning again. They say even the royal physician refuses to stand too close.
She listened but never spoke, until the day the storm came inside the palace walls. The council hall was full that afternoon. Nobles stood in shining clothes. Generals carried maps of borderlands. Advisors argued about rising threats from a rival kingdom. Voices grew louder. King Aelric sat on his dark throne carved from obsidian stone. His expression was calm at first, but his jaw was tight. One advisor, bold and careless, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said loudly, "the people grow afraid. Crops fail when storms come. Trade slows. Perhaps if your Majesty showed more—" He did not finish his sentence. A crack of thunder exploded through the chamber. The torches burst into higher flame. Wind tore through closed windows as if invisible hands forced them open. Papers flew into the air. The marble floor trembled. Aelric rose slowly from his throne. His silver eyes burned brighter. "Finish your sentence," he said in a low voice. The advisor fell to his knees. I meant no disrespect. The king's power surged like a wave. Guards struggled to stand. Chandeliers shook. Dark clouds formed beneath the high ceiling, swirling unnaturally. The storm was not outside this time. It was inside. Servants rushed to escape. Among them was Elwyn. She had only come to deliver fresh water pitchers. She had never stood this close to the king before. She felt the pressure in the air, thick and heavy. It was hard to breathe. Fear told her to run. But something else held her still. She looked at him, not as a king, not as a monster, but as a man in pain. His hands were clenched. His breathing was uneven. His power was not controlled anger. It was something deeper. It felt like loneliness turned into fire. The storm rose higher. Glass shattered. Without thinking, Elowyn stepped forward. A guard tried to grab her arm. "Are you mad?" "Stay back!" But she slipped free. She did not know why she moved. She did not think of prophecy. She did not think of danger. She only saw a man losing control. And she felt calm, as if a quiet lake lived inside her chest. She reached him. For a moment, time slowed.
Bee!
The wind howled around them. The king turned sharply toward her. His eyes flashed, ready to warn her away. But she did not flinch. Slowly, gently, she placed her hand over his. Soft, warm, silence. The wind stopped. The clouds vanished like smoke fading in air. Torches returned to normal flame. The marble floor stilled. The entire chamber froze in shock. Aelric stared down at her hand on his. The burning in his chest, the endless storm, quieted. Not gone, but quiet, like waves lowering after a long night.
He inhaled slowly.
For the first time in years, the air felt clear. He looked at her fully. She did not look away. Her gray eyes were steady, not fearful, not proud, simply present. "Who are you?" he asked softly. The room was still too shocked to speak. "Aloan, your majesty," she replied. Her voice was simple, honest. He studied her face as if searching for hidden power. But she wore plain servant clothing, no jewels, no marks of status. Just calm. The court began whispering.
How is this possible?
She touched him.
She is still standing.
Elric slowly turned his hand beneath hers, gripping her wrist gently.
Not in anger.
"I was," she answered quietly. "But you seemed more so." The king did not react with fury. Instead, something unreadable crossed his face. He released a slow breath. "Clear the chamber," he ordered. No one hesitated. Within moments, the grand hall emptied, leaving only the king, the guards at a distance, and the quiet Omega standing before him. "You stopped it," he said. "I do not know how," she admitted. He searched her eyes again. There was no deception there, only sincerity. For years, healers, seers, and warriors had tried to control his rage. Nothing worked. They used spells, potions, ancient runes. Nothing. Yet this quiet servant had done what no one else could. "With one touch, you will remain in the palace," Aelric said finally. Eloan's heart tightened. "Your Majesty, I already work here." "Not in the kitchens." His tone was firm but not harsh. "You will stay near me. The words echoed with deeper meaning. A shadow of uncertainty passed over her face. "For the safety of the kingdom," he added. It sounded like a reason, but even he was not sure if that was the truth. Guards stepped forward carefully, not to seize her, but to escort her. As they walked through long stone corridors, whispers spread like wildfire. "The king has chosen her. Is she a witch? A blessing? A threat?" Eowyn felt their stares. Her hands trembled slightly now that the storm had passed. What had she done? What had she done? Behind them in the empty council hall, King Elric stood alone. He flexed his fingers, slowly. The fire inside him was still there, but softer, quieter, and for the first time, he felt something stronger than rage. Need. Not for power, not for control, but for the calm she carried. He looked toward the door she had exited through. A king should fear weakness. A ruler should never depend on another. Yet the thought of her leaving the palace unsettled him more than any rival army ever had. Outside, the sky above Varenth began to clear. For the first time in many years, sunlight broke through the clouds. And in the quiet corridors of the palace, the Alpha King realized something that unsettled him deeply. The only person who could calm his storm was the one he could not command. The palace never felt the same after that day. Eowyn's life had changed in a single moment. One gentle touch had silenced a storm that had raged for years inside the Alpha King. At first, she did not understand why. The palace corridors were vast, echoing with the voices of guards, servants, and nobles. Each step she took seemed heavier than the last. Everyone stared. The gossip had already begun. The king has taken interest in her. She is nothing but a servant. Do not be fooled. She is dangerous. She had spent most of her life being overlooked. Now, she wanted nothing more than to survive. But surviving near Elric Thornvale was no simple task. The first morning after the council hall incident, Elric summoned her to his private chambers. The room was enormous, with tall windows, dark wood walls, and thick tapestries depicting battles from centuries past. The air smelled faintly of rain and iron, a reminder of the king's presence. Eowyn stood by the doorway, clutching her hands. Her heart beat fast. She had no rank, no protection, and no idea what the king might do. "Come forward," Elric said without turning. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of command. She stepped inside. "Do not be afraid," he said. He finally turned, his silver eyes catching the dim light. "You will not be punished. She began, but he raised his hand. "I need to understand," he said. "Why did your touch calm me?" Eowyn shook her head. "I do not know, Your Majesty. I only acted instinctively. I did not want to see anyone hurt." Elric studied her. The room was silent except for the distant howl of wolves beyond the palace walls. His hand rested on the arm of the throne chair. He did not reach for her, yet somehow she felt the pull of his presence. "You should not have that power," he said softly, almost to himself. Eowyn blinked. "I have no power. I am just me."
He laughed quietly, a sound like rolling thunder held back.
"No one is just anything around me." She flinched at the intensity in his gaze. For the next few days, Eowyn's life became a delicate balance. She continued her work in the kitchens and corridors, but the king summoned her frequently. Sometimes he merely wanted her near during council meetings. Other times he wanted to speak privately. Each time her presence calmed him, and each time she felt the weight of his gaze like a shadow she could not escape. The court watched closely. Nobles whispered and wondered aloud why the fearsome Alpha King allowed a mere servant to influence him. Generals grumbled in the halls. Advisors argued in secret. Some suggested sending her away. Aelric refused. "She is staying," he declared one evening, standing in the moonlit hall with his back straight, the crown glinting on his head. "No one leaves my sight without my permission, not even my generals."
Ah! Eloan's heart beat faster, but she lowered her eyes.
She did not want the king to think she was proud. Pride could be dangerous in this palace. One afternoon, she found herself walking with Aelric through the palace gardens. The gardens were silent, except for the occasional cry of a bird. Flowers bloomed in muted colors. The stone fountains were still, reflecting the sky above. "You are quiet," Aelric said, finally breaking the silence. "I have always been quiet," she answered.
"Why?" Eloan hesitated. No one had asked her that before.
"Listen," she said finally. "And sometimes listening is better than speaking." Aelric had spoken to many advisors, generals, and nobles, and yet few ever spoke truth so simply. "Listening," he repeated, "it is a rare skill among my people." Her gray eyes met his silver ones. For a moment, they shared a silence that was not awkward. It was deep. But the peace did not last. The next council meeting was more tense than ever. An advisor dared to criticize the king's decisions. "Your Majesty," the man said, "the northern border is weak."
"The people are frightened. Perhaps your anger clouds judgment."
Aelric's hands clenched. His silver eyes flashed. A storm began to rise inside the hall. Papers lifted. Wind swept through the corridors. The nobles froze. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Eloan instinctively stepped forward. Her hand found his. Immediately, the storm subsided. The wind dropped. The papers settled. Silence filled the room. The king's eyes softened as he looked down at her. "You are remarkable,"
He whispered. Eloan shook her head.
I only want peace. Peace, he repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. Peace. The court, however, did not understand. Whispers of danger spread even faster than praise. "She controls him," some said. "She is a witch," others claimed. Aelric ignored them all, but his grip on her hand lingered longer than necessary. In the evenings, Aelric summoned Eloan to his chambers again. He began to ask her about small things, her life, her home, her thoughts. She spoke carefully. She did not want to seem too bold. Yet, slowly, she realized something. He was not just a king. He was a man shaped by loneliness, by fear, and by the impossible weight of the throne. And for the first time, he trusted her. "You are different from anyone else in this palace," he said one night, pacing the chamber. "Others fear me." "Others obey me. You calm me without fear." Eloan swallowed. "I do not want power," she said. "You have power," he said quietly, "more than anyone I know. And I do not know if I should be grateful or afraid." She did not answer. The truth was that she felt fear and fascination both. Days turned into weeks. Eloan learned the rhythms of the palace. When Aelric was calm, when he was restless, when his storms were near. She learned to move with him, quietly, like a shadow that softened the edges of his life. And Aelric began to rely on her more than he expected. Sometimes he would reach for her hand before he realized it. Sometimes he would pause mid-meeting and glance toward her for reassurance. The nobles noticed. Some were concerned, others curious, but no one dared challenge him openly. Even the rival kingdoms heard rumors. The Alpha King is changed. by a servant girl. One evening, after a particularly difficult council meeting, Eowyn tried to step away from the king. "I should return to the kitchens," she said softly, but Aelric stopped her with a sudden hand on her wrist. "You cannot leave," he said. His silver eyes glimmered with something she could not name. "Not now." Her heart tightened. "Your Majesty, I am not important. I am only a servant." "You are more important than you know," he replied. For a moment, she saw the man behind the king. The man who had never allowed anyone to see him afraid. The man who had never allowed anyone near enough to calm him. And yet, here he was, reaching for her again, like a child searching for comfort. Eowyn pulled her hand away slightly, just enough to test him. He flinched, almost imperceptibly. The faintest spark of his storm flickered in his eyes. "You cannot leave," he said again, more quietly, almost a whisper. She realized something terrifying. Her presence did not just calm him, it anchored him. And if she left, the storm would return stronger than before. That night, she could not sleep. She thought about the king, the palace, and the strange, unspoken bond between them. She had never wanted to wield power. She had never wanted to be important. Yet somehow, she was the only one who could calm a king whose rage shook the world. And she wondered if that made her a danger or a gift. Outside, the wind whispered through the towers. Wolves howled in the distance. The moon was full, silver and cold. Inside, the Alpha King stood by the window, silent. His silver eyes stared into the night, but he did not see the stars. He saw only her, and for the first time in decades, he admitted something to himself. He could not let her go. The night after the council meeting, the palace was silent. Only the distant howl of wolves reached the high towers. Aelric Thornvale did not sleep. He stood at the window of his private chambers, looking down at the dark streets of Varinth. Moonlight glimmered on the cobblestones, but the city seemed smaller than it was. Empty, silent, like the calm that had always been absent from his life. Eowyn had returned to her quarters for the night, but he could not stop thinking about her. The gentle Omega who had touched him, who had calmed the storm he thought no one could tame. Aelric paced the room, his silver eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. The truth he had hidden from all, his closest advisors, his generals, even the palace seers, was something he could no longer ignore. The curse. He had carried it for decades. It was not a simple spell or a punishment from a rival king. It was a binding, a choice he had made himself. Years ago, when Varinth faced invasion, the young Prince Alric had made a pact with a spirit of primordial wrath. The spirit had promised him unstoppable strength and victory in battle, in exchange for dominance over his heart and mind. At first, it had seemed a gift. The kingdom was saved. Enemies fled. The young king rose to power faster than anyone could imagine. But the gift had a cost. The spirit fed on his anger, his need to control, his fury. The more he relied on it, the more he lost the ability to be gentle, to trust, to love. His storms were no longer only in the sky, they were in him, always, and no one could calm him, until Eowyn. The memory of her touch returned vividly to him, the warmth of her hand, the softness of her presence, the calm that spread through him as if some part of him he had never known had awakened. He had tried to ignore it, tried to remind himself that she was only a servant, that she had no rank, no claim, no right to his attention. But the storm inside him would not be ignored. Aelric realized something terrifying. The spirit that had guided him for decades, feeding on his rage, shaping him into a weapon, was threatened by her. Every time she came near, it lost its hold. Every time she touched him, the fire of wrath dimmed, not because she weakened him, but because she reminded him he could be more than the spirit's puppet. And the spirit did not like that. Meanwhile, Eowyn began to notice strange occurrences in the palace. Flickering shadows followed her in the corridors, even when no one was there. Mirrors cracked slightly when she passed. Servants whispered about feeling watched by something unseen. She tried to ignore it, believing the palace rumors. Yet one night, a cold voice, soft but sharp, seemed to echo in her mind. "Step away from him, or be destroyed." She shivered. It was not the first time she had sensed something unnatural around the king. But the voice was clear now. It wanted her gone. Elowyn did not run. Not yet. Instead, she decided to understand the power she unknowingly held. She ventured to the palace library, a vast hall filled with ancient books and scrolls, forbidden texts hidden behind locked shelves. She had seen the court scholars whispering about the Alpha King's curse. Maybe there she could learn the truth. Hours passed. Dust settled around her. Her fingers traced the spines of old tomes. Finally, she found a thin, leather-bound book, covered in runes that pulsed faintly under her touch. Opening it, she read words that seemed to leap from the page. Only a balance-bearer can tame a cursed ruler. Not a mate, not a servant, but one whose soul can calm the storm without fear or desire for dominion. To anchor the Alpha King is to risk one's own life, for the curse feeds on the bond between rage and power. Her heart skipped balance-bearer. She remembered the prophecy whispered to the court long ago, of a king born under a blood moon whose fury would consume the land unless the storm was quieted. Could it be her? Her pulse quickened, the same pulse that had calmed him in the council hall. She realized now that her touch had not just comforted him. It had interrupted a force older than the kingdom itself, and that force was angry. The next day, the tension in the palace escalated. Rival kingdoms had learned of Aelric's unusual dependence on a servant girl. Spies whispered that the Alpha King was weak. Generals grew nervous. Advisors argued, "Your Majesty," one said cautiously, "perhaps she should be sent away." The people will not understand this unusual connection. It might appear as weakness. Aelric's hand clenched. A flicker of his old storm rose in his chest, threatening to break free. "Bathe day I will, and she will remain here as long as I require her presence." The court fell silent. Elowyn, who had been standing nearby, felt her throat tighten. She wanted to speak, to refuse, but every time she considered leaving, a cold whisper of the spirit's wrath made her hesitate. The curse wanted her gone, and she was beginning to realize why. That night, Aelric summoned her once more to his chambers. The candles cast long shadows across the walls. The air smelled of rain and iron, the same scent that always accompanied him. He did not speak immediately. He simply stood, his eyes fixed on her. "Elowyn," he said finally, his voice low, "you need to understand something. The storm inside me. It is not natural. It is a choice I made." She listened, heart pounding. "I bound myself to a spirit," he continued, "years ago to save my kingdom. It gave me power, strength, and fury. Fury that feeds on my anger, on my need to control. The more I give in, the stronger it becomes. If I calm myself, it will consume me. If I remain angry, the kingdom suffers." Elowyn took a step closer, unsure whether to comfort him or step back. "You calmed me," he said, his silver eyes searching hers. "Every time you are near, the fire inside me fades. I do not know if it is blessing or danger." She swallowed. I only want to help. I did not mean to He shook his head. You do not control me. You are something else. Something the spirit cannot touch.
The room was silent for a long moment.
Then he said quietly, "Do you know what this means? If I become calm, if I trust completely, I could die.
And if I remain angry, the kingdom will fall. You are the only one who can anchor me."
And that terrifies me. Elowyn realized she had not just calmed him. She had become the only bridge between the king and his cursed power. Over the next days, she tried to balance her presence carefully. Every time she was near, Elric's rage softened. Every time she withdrew, it flared again. She began to see the immense burden he carried, not just as a king, but as a man bound to a dangerous power. Yet, even as she worried for his life, a strange connection grew between them. Small moments, when he looked at her across the council hall, when he spoke to her in private, when he allowed himself to be vulnerable for a brief instant.
Elowyn felt the pull of the bond. She had never expected to care for a king, especially one whose presence was like fire and stone.
But she did. Then came the night of the first warning. The shadows in the palace seemed to gather. Candles flickered. The wind outside moaned like wolves in a far-off forest. Elowyn was walking back from the library when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned. It was Aelric, his face pale in the candlelight. "The spirit," he whispered. "It knows you are the anchor. It does not want you near me. You must be careful. If it senses fear, if it senses doubt, it will strike." Her pulse quickened. Strike?
How? What can it do?
His eyes were stormy, a mixture of fear and anger.
"It can destroy!"
"It has no mercy, and it will stop at nothing to keep its hold on me."
Elowyn felt a chill run through her body. I do not want to hurt you," she said softly.
"You do not understand," he said. "The moment I let you go..." "The storm will return, and I do not know if I can stop it alone." She looked at him, and for the first time, truly saw the man behind the crown. Not the Alpha King, not the ruler of a cursed land, but a man weighed down by choices he had made, by power he could not fully control, by a need that was terrifyingly human. And she realized he needed her, not as a servant, not as a weapon, but as something far more fragile, far more essential. Elowyn understood now that her presence was not just important, it was necessary. The king's life, the kingdom's survival, and the balance between fury and calm rested in her hands. She had no desire to wield power. She had no desire to control. But she had the power to anchor a king, and the spirit would not allow it quietly. The first battle of control had begun. Aelric stood at the window, his hand brushing hers accidentally, as they watched the moonlight dance on the towers. "Woo. I cannot lose you," he whispered. Elowyn met his gaze. "And I cannot leave you," she said softly. The storm outside was calm, for now, but both knew it was only a matter of time before the curse tried to reclaim what it thought was its. The morning sun had not yet risen over Varinth, yet the kingdom stirred with tension. Rival forces from the north had advanced toward the borders, sensing weakness in the kingdom. Rumors had spread that the Alpha King had grown dependent on a mere servant girl. They assumed the king's fury had softened, and that Varinth would crumble under attack. But they did not know the truth. The truth was far more dangerous. Elric Thornvale, the Alpha King, had a storm inside him, an ancient, furious power that had saved and destroyed kingdoms alike. The storm had been quieted, not by weapons or magic, but by the touch of Elowyn, a rejected Omega with a calm heart and a quiet strength no one else had recognized. And now, the king faced a choice that could decide the fate of his kingdom. and his own life. Elowyn walked beside him through the palace corridors. Soldiers and servants parted silently, sensing the tension in the air. "The enemy will arrive by dusk," one general whispered, bowing his head. Aelric did not reply. His silver eyes were fixed on the horizon beyond the palace walls. Elowyn glanced at him, her hand brushing against his. "You do not have to face them alone," she said softly. He shook his head, a shadow passing over his face. "Alone?" he asked quietly. "I have not been alone in decades. Not since the curse bound me. And yet, I fear that even with you, I may not survive what comes." Her hand tightened gently around his. "Then we face it together." He stared at her, truly looked at her. The calm in her gray eyes contrasted with the fire in his silver ones. For the first time he saw clarity, not command, not fear, not rage, but something deeper, trust. And he realized that the curse, the spirit of wrath he had carried for so many years, would not yield to force. It would yield only to choice. That evening, the palace gates opened to the enemy army. Thousands of soldiers in dark armor advanced, confident that Varenth's king had grown weak. The wind picked up, and clouds gathered, dark and heavy, as if reflecting the looming storm inside the king. Aelric raised his hand, and the air shifted. The first hint of thunder rolled through the courtyard. Soldiers shivered. Elowyn stepped beside him. "You cannot fight this alone," she said quietly.
He looked down at her.
"I do not fight alone, not with you here." The enemy called for surrender, mocking the king's reliance on a servant girl. Aelric's silver eyes burned. A storm rose in his chest. The spirit inside stirred, angry and furious, demanding domination, but he did not give in. Instead, he turned to Elowyn. "Stay with me," he said. "I will need your strength more than ever." She nodded, placing her hand in his. The warmth of her touch steadied him. The spirit spoke then, a voice like cracking thunder in Aelric's mind. "Release her. She is not yours. Surrender to me, and I will destroy your enemies. Keep her, and you will die." Aelric clenched his fists. Rage surged. The fire in the sky mirrored his fury. The palace trembled. Guards fell to their knees. The army waited, confused and wary. He looked at Elowyn. Her eyes were calm, steady, unwavering. He realized the truth. The spirit's power had been strong because he had relied on fear, on anger, on control. But what it could not endure was trust, connection, choice. He took a deep breath. "I choose you," he whispered, and with that he released his claim to the spirit. The invisible chain that had bound him snapped. The storm inside his chest did not vanish. It transformed. Instead of rage, it became a quiet, steady energy. The fire cooled. The wind softened. The lightning faded. The spirit shrieked, a sound that shook the earth, and then vanished, undone by the king's willingness to surrender control. Aelric collapsed to his knees, exhausted.
Elowyn knelt beside him. "You're alive," she said softly.
He looked up at her, a smile breaking across his face. Tired, but genuine.
"Alive because of you." Outside, the enemy army hesitated.
They had expected a raging king, a storm to sweep them away. Instead, they saw a calm, determined ruler and a quiet presence at his side. The contrast was unnerving. The generals rallied the soldiers not with fear, but with unity. Varenth's army, inspired by their king's choice, stood firm. The enemy retreated, surprised and defeated by a kingdom whose leader had chosen restraint over wrath. The next morning, the palace was filled with a sense of quiet triumph. Aelric summoned the court. Nobles, generals, and advisors gathered, eyes wide with awe. He stood at the front, tall and calm. Elowyn stood beside him, not behind, not beneath, but at his side. "The curse that haunted me is gone," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Not by battle, not by force, but by choice. And by trust. Varinth survives because we faced our storm together." The court gasped. Whispers spread. They had expected a king who ruled through fear and anger, not one who chose compassion and calm. Aelric looked at Elowyn. "You were the anchor," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Without you, I would have failed."
"You did this yourself, Your Majesty. I only helped you see it."
He smiled, reaching for her hand. "No. You helped me survive. You helped me be human again." In the days that followed, Varinth began to heal. The skies cleared. Crops thrived. Trade resumed. The people whispered of a king who had tamed a storm not by rage, but by choice, and of a servant girl who had changed the fate of a kingdom. Elowyn did not seek recognition. She returned to her work in the palace quietly, but her presence was no longer invisible. Guards and servants treated her with respect. Nobles regarded her with cautious admiration. And the king could not bear to let her leave his side. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers, Aelric found her in the gardens. "You could have returned to your quarters,"
he said quietly. "I wanted to see the sunset," she replied. He approached her slowly, his gaze soft, no trace of the storm that had once burned in his chest.
"I have something I must admit," he said. She looked up at him. "What is it?"
He reached for her hand. "I do not need you to calm me anymore."
"But I cannot imagine a day without you." Elowyn felt her heart race. "You do not need me? I do not need your touch to survive," he said. "But I choose to have you with me every day. Not because of power, not because of duty, but because I want you." Her eyes softened. "And I want you too." For the first time, they stood together freely. Not ruler and servant, not alpha and omega, but equals, bonded by choice, trust, and understanding. The winds whispered gently through the gardens. The sun set in golden hues, painting the sky in warm colors. Wolves howled in the distance, not with warning, but as if honoring the quiet triumph of life, trust, and connection. Weeks later, the palace was peaceful, the kingdom prospered, and the bond between the Alpha King and the Omega grew stronger every day. Elowyn had found a home in the palace, not because of her rank or her power or her role as an anchor, but because she had chosen to stand beside him, and he had chosen her in return. Elric no longer ruled through fear. His storms had been transformed into calm determination. He had learned that true strength was not in wrath, but in restraint, not in control, but in trust. And the Omega, once rejected by all, had become the quiet force that shaped a kingdom, not by taming a beast, but by teaching him how to choose. They walked through the palace gardens each evening, side by side, hands entwined, hearts aligned. The kingdom watched in awe, not because of fear, but because of loyalty born from admiration and respect. The Alpha King who had once been feared now smiled freely. The Omega who had once been overlooked now carried the weight of influence, not through command, but through courage, calm, and love. And in the quiet of the palace, under skies that no longer trembled, they knew the truth. Some storms cannot be fought. Some curses cannot be broken. But some storms can be calmed. Some curses can be healed when love is chosen.